Patrick Johnston covers the Vancouver Canucks for the province and Post Media. He attended last night's 5-1 loss to the Los Angeles Kings, and he joins us now. How are you?
Well, as you said, I attended, and I had to wake up and think about the game last night. So I've had better.
At least you attended, and 18,000 others, because I'm not sure there was much attendance on the home bench last night. You hear the head coach talking about it.
Yeah. They started okay. I mean, the Archie Baines obviously penalty was not a great start, but I thought they were playing all right through 10 minutes. And I think I said aloud, I was sitting next to Jeff. I said, this game's going to need a goal though. And I meant the Canucks.
Well, hang on a second. Which of their three shots in the first period?
It went, but then it went south. Like, this is it. Like, they scored and it was over. Like, the Kings scored. You just knew the Kings scored. There was no coming back. And the revealing thing to me, I asked three different people. Quinn Hughes was asked about sort of speed and body position, whatever, and he basically said, "I don't know what we got to do." I said, "Do you have to work more with do more with less?" He said, Quinn Hughes was a little bit speechless almost after the game. I mean, he's always careful. He's not a guy that's going to rip his team, but that was one of those moments where I think I asked a question, Daniel Wagner asked a question, he was just kind of without an answer in the moment, and asked Pettersson the same kind of thing, and he was basically yes, but you got to dig a little deeper. And then Rick Tocchet just went off about body position, which is that nobody's in position. You're not there before you have to be ready before the puck gets there, and they just weren't ready before the puck gets there. And then they're lollygagging to the bench and on and on and on and on. There was the thing about last night's game was they just didn't have any push when they needed to push, and that's going to be something they need.
Would you say it was egregious, Patrick?
I mean, I was impressed with how often he said egregious, but it was funny. If I came away, the thing with Tocchet was that he wasn't like spitting mad. He was just incredibly frustrated, but also like the tone of his voice never raised. He was just straight up about, like, this wasn't good. That we needed more. We're in a funk. Like, I think that's part of it. He's like, we're in a funk. He's not getting mad, but he is frustrated.
Yeah, he's disappointed. He's not mad. He's disappointed. And it was clinical frustration.
Yeah.
From
Didn't name names again, but said 6 or 7 guys don't have it. And
that's up from 4 or 5 on the weekend.
I think for the first time, maybe all season, Patrick, the captain's included in that and didn't escape the criticism from the coach last night.
No, exactly. The guys that you need to push the pace, and that's why I asked the question about Kopitar. Like, Antti Kopitar was put in. That's why he's going to the Hall of Fame, and Drew Doughty and similar teams. But Antti Kopitar was kind of the top line star, scoring a goal on a bad turnover by Pettersson. That bad things happen. These things happen, but like that's as bad as it gets. And the fantastic play on the power play, where basically Ian Cole over-anticipated, thinking the puck was going to get rimmed around. I mean, even Kevin Fiala didn't really know what was happening, but his stick was on the ice. That's why you keep your stick on the ice. The Kings' big game players had big games. The team said that was the most complete. The Kings said that was the most complete game they played all season, and they were fed. And Cam Talbot noticed how frustrated he saw the Canucks were getting because they couldn't figure it out. And that goes back again to what Rick Tocchet's been pressing on, is that you can't get frustrated. You got to keep playing. And you wonder now, okay, were they, does that mean the Canucks were trying what they were trying to do and it really wasn't working? And is that going to mean that they're going to lose their way? I mean, I don't think they've done so much so well this season. It's hard to imagine them not rediscovering that, but this is a moment where you need your best players to lead the way. And JT Miller's been doing that. But Elias Pettersson, the noise, like obviously the noise is there. He acknowledged it to some degree to Sportsnet, to a degree with me the other day. Doesn't, as he said last night, he doesn't want to talk about what's going on. Things have obviously changed, but you can't help but wonder if that's an issue there. But yeah, this team needs to fight its way out. The best players need to be their best players.
Let me ask you. Hughes is averaging 24 minutes and 46 seconds of ice per night. It's actually now a full minute more than Philip Hronek.
Yeah.
Do you think they've just leaned on him too much? Do you think fatigue is setting in here? They've worn Quinn down over the first 3 quarters.
I don't know. I mean, it's he's missing. There's no doubt he's missing some spark, right? Like the forays into the offensive zone that we saw early in the season, we just haven't seen. So is that a player that's getting checked? Is that a player that's not reading as well as he was? It's possible. Yeah, he's playing a lot. I did notice how much he played. It was something we talked about in the press box last night. In the end, this is a team that's struggling. Why aren't you you need something going? Your best pairing was Hughes and Hronek, and you're trying not to, and it didn't come till the third period. Yeah, the fact that they've 3 wins and 13, 3 regulation wins and 13, they're chasing a lot. And this is something that the players themselves have all been warning about. I wrote a story about JT Miller on Wednesday where I asked him about his ice time, because his average ice time is under 20 minutes a game, which is the lowest it's been since he showed up in Vancouver. And he said, yeah, like, we're not chasing the game in the end. Of course I'm feeling fresher. But lately they have been chasing the game, and that is different. And that is a different task than what they've been doing before. So Hughes being worn down, sure. I think the state of the game is different. That's part of it too, is that when you're chasing the game, as we saw last night, breaking on the inside is a harder thing to do. To me, more than anything, it's just the fact that they aren't taking charge of the game they were, and they're having to chase the game. And I think we're seeing the results. It's hard to chase in this league to begin with. And I think the Canucks would be best to getting back to what I recommended last night, which was scoring first and not letting the other team score.
Yeah, although they had a 2-0 lead against Pittsburgh the other night, and that didn't serve them so well either. And in fact, they had a 2-0 lead in Minnesota and ended up giving up 10 that afternoon. So I don't think that's it helps, but that's not the magic bullet. Certainly, you know what might be a few more saves along the way. And they've had the most of the season. Their save percentage is sub 900 across the board since the All-Star break. And that's a significant sample now. That's basically a month of February. Their save percentage was at 895.
And if you look at everything that gets discussed, the staples and so on, is that it's all tied together. The reason why they aren't looking very good is because they aren't playing very well on their own end. And their goalies, last night, listen, there's no way you pin this loss on Demko, right?
Nope.
But 5 goals on 20 shots, I mean, that's not a good look for anybody. And there's a systemic, they're not getting, the thing is that it's the bearing down aspects. Like there's bad reads. That's why Tocchet used egregious. He said there were just some egregious moments. On the whole, played okay, but they had some really bad mistakes that led to problems. I mean, you bring up the Pittsburgh game, look who beat them. Best players, right? Best players here again tonight. That is the overall issue, is that there's that 1v1 who is winning the best players battle, and the Canucks keep coming up second, and the results are the defense has not been playing very well. The offense has kind of been okay, and it was always going to kind of come back to earth. Like we've talked about this on and on and on. This was the PDO story. I said the offense was going to come back to earth, but there was every reason to think defensively they were going to continue to be solid, and they have not been. And that is, to me, that's the biggest issue more than anything. Okay, Quinn Hughes, you need more points from him. Pettersson, you need more points. But the overall defensive game, which probably applies to the goalies as well, just needs to be improved.
Dakota Joshua but I had a gentleman last night come up to me and say that this shows how much they're missing Dakota Joshua. You wouldn't think the third line left winger could have that big an impact on the team, but you tell me, is this losing streak somewhat coincides with Dakota Joshua's leaving the lineup after the Chicago game?
It's more glaring, I think, what's missing. I don't think he is the reason, because the slump had started before he got hurt. But yes, absolutely. The way he plays is exactly what they need more of. You think about the forecheck of Connor Garland. He was winning pucks last night, and there were pucks getting turned over, but that line as a trio, him and Bluger and Joshua, were so good at sustaining things in the offensive zone. And that overall has not been there. And there is all the knock-on effects that you see in the lineup that I mean, maybe less so because the fourth line's kind of become nothing, because Ilya Mikheyev is just such a total zero. But Joshua adds so much more that you don't have to use those guys as much. And now you're having to use these guys that are struggling. Pio Di Giuseppe has been struggling. Sam Lafferty's been struggling. That's 3 wingers right there that you're having to lean more on because Dakota Joshua is not in the lineup. it's a cascade effect there. I think that's absolutely a story. It's not that they win because of Joshua, but it's because of all the other things that happen around him, and obviously the penalty kill as well. Like, he's been such a key penalty killer, and the you look. I mean, the PK has not been good for a while, and a lot of it is. If you want to point to one thing directly with him, yeah, I would say because he's not there, because he's not killing penalties. He hopefully is soon. I mean, Carson Soucy seems slightly ahead of him. We'll see how close. I mean, the scan. He was supposed to have a scan or results of his scan for Soucy yesterday, I think. We'll see. I think Joshua, it certainly seems like the timeline would be like the end of next week, give or take. So we'll see if he goes on the road trip, I guess.
Well, they will welcome him back whenever, but it doesn't get any easier. Like, this road trip starts in Anaheim. That's probably a Casey DeSmith start. Now there's real pressure on him to deliver. And if it doesn't go well in Anaheim, it's the rematch against the Kings, it's Vegas, and then it's home to Winnipeg and Colorado. It's the first game of March. I'm not going down must-win Boulevard, but they kind of better win in Anaheim, or this skid could very well turn into a full-blown slump.
Meaningful games in March.
It's a tough trip. There's just no way about it. And you look at that. I mean, obviously Anaheim is. I mean, yes, you're right. But you look beyond that, and you look at the LA game, you look at the Vegas game, and the way things looked on Thursday. They're playing in LA on Tuesday. The way things looked on Thursday, that was not a good sign for a potential playoff series. Like, I don't think we said at the beginning of the year, nobody wants to play LA in the playoffs. And we're seeing why, because that team is no fun to play against. They still have some top end game breakers from years gone by. They have some young game breakers coming into the lineup. This is a huge test. I mean, talk about exactly as you said. This is a team in a slump. This would be a great slump busting road trip, but it could also be an absolutely disastrous road trip for where you're sitting. And with the Edmonton Oilers chasing hard after you, Vegas, who knows what's going to happen with them? But you want to round back into form. I mean, good thing there's still some time left until the playoffs, but that time is going to start running short. And by the time we talk to each other, we're going to be speaking 15 games from the playoffs and a day before the deadline.
Okay. You tell me then, answer the poll question. The last 2 weeks, 1-5-1, is that just a blip?
Yeah, I think it's just a blip. I do. I really do think that. I think that there's enough in this team that I never thought necessarily they were first overall, but I thought, once they started getting things going and we saw how they were playing, and obviously they were getting bounces, but on the whole, I thought this was a team that was going to be a solid playoff team. They were in the mix of they certainly had become better than a playoff bubble team. They were in that mix of, okay, you know what? You get in, you get some bounces, your goalie gets hot. Yeah, you could do something. They're not a contender yet, but they're getting close. I'm interested to see what they do in the next week. But yeah, I think this is a blip. I think this is a slide. Right. I think the true team is between where they started the year and this blip that we're seeing right now.
On that Pettersson fellow, how surprised were you with the events of this week? Because Rutherford and Alvin were playing a very high stakes game there. They risked alienating him as much as they risked getting him back to the table, or encouraged him to get back to the table. So how surprised were you with the events of this week, and where do you think this Pettersson file ends up?
In hindsight, I shouldn't be surprised, I suppose. This is a management team, certainly a president who has always gotten what he wanted done, has not been shy. Look back to last year with his coach. He has not been shy of criticism of the approach. He knows what he looks at what needs to happen and how you get there. If indeed it is a case of basically saying, listen, we're trying to shake your tree and say, this is what could happen if you do not come to the table and talk about this contract. I'm a bit surprised, because you have to believe that they'll actually trade you to Carolina, and in the moment, probably not, but postseason, yeah. That listen, you put this in this position where we have to figure out what your value is, and we have to plan for the future. And this is the kind of thing that could happen postseason. It is not exactly it's not a conventional approach. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But in the end, what you're leaning on is a desire from the player to stay here and to be here. And that is going to overhaul every other thing that could possibly happen in this discussion. And if the player doesn't want to be here, well, at least now you know that you kind of have to force the call. And that is what this was in the end.
Yeah. Jim Rutherford's not going to get pushed around. He has been ruthless, as you say, with Bruce Boudreau and on other matters. And we got another example of it. Does it end with a Pettersson 8-year deal or an extension less than that?
I think most likely less. If you logic it out, I mean, obviously the Canucks would like the 8-year deal because that's just certainty, and then they can deal with him when he's 33 years old or whatever. From the Pettersson standpoint, you get a 5-year. You sign a 5-year deal now. His new deal comes up when he's 30, and there's a much better chance of signing, another 5 years when you're 30 versus when you're 33. So you're talking about 10 years of good salary versus 8 years of good salary. There's an aggregate question here. And I think, I just think from his position that's what he's going to do. The Canucks, I mean, the impression we all have is that, Canucks are basically ready and willing to do whatever Pettersson wants to do. And if you're Patrick Allvin, your task right now is to get the player under contract because you're looking at next year. What do GMs inevitably have to focus on? They have to focus on this year and next year and how do they keep their jobs. And that's how they stand. They're not thinking about 6, 7, 8 years from now. And if it means 5 years from now, that's Patrick Allvin 2029's problem and not 2024 Patrick Allvin's problem.
So where does it go from here, though? On Wednesday, there was a ton of momentum. It's now Friday, and it's kind of gone quiet a little bit. They head out on the road here, trade deadline a week from now. Yeah. Do we see the formality and an announcement before the trade deadline, or do you think it gets pushed a little beyond that?
I mean, the announcement part is the least important part, right? We were talking about this. You game it out a little bit. Sure, you could announce it on the road. I mean, maybe that's what Pettersson would prefer because there's fewer questions that way, at least in the moment. The contract itself is not hard. It's a standard player contract. You're debating years, average value, and how the bonuses are going to be structured. That's it. He's not over 35. It's not an ELC. Those are the moving parts. So that part could easily come together very quickly. I mean, heck, they could have it tomorrow morning. I don't think they will. I think this is, was it you that pointed out this is this will be the biggest contract in team history? That's not something you don't have a big event for. They had a big thing for Rutherford. They had a reasonably big thing for Allvin. The idea that they wouldn't have a similar thing for Pettersson seems odd. If there had been a day, it would have been today, I think, to do it. Otherwise, I think we're looking in terms of formal announcement, formal press conference. I think we're talking about, probably not the deadline. You're probably looking at some time after that. And, but the contract, I mean, it's entirely possible. This is just me guessing. I have no idea, but it's entirely possible. The contract gets done long before that, and they just announce it later on.
Speaking of deadline, give me one name, trade deadline wise, that you would like to see the Vancouver Canucks add that you think addresses a need and is a good within reality, within reason here, Patrick.
I want you to say Elias Lindholm, but that's another conversation.
I mean, I would love to see Sean Walker. I don't think that's happening. Alex Carrier, that's somebody who might be interesting to me. Right shot guy, can move the puck. It was interesting to see that the Leafs went for Lyubushkin, who's a solid defensively, but absolute zero moving forward. And there's guys that can move the puck. And so a guy like that is what I think. I think if you're looking at the Canucks, you're trying to find that extra guy. You're also thinking about next year. obviously Soucy's going to be back, but you need to be ready for someone getting hurt, and you need a guy who can play beyond just a guy who's a good, solid depth character. You have a solid depth character in Noah Juulsen. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now. I mean, obviously Tanev would have been a great fit, and I find myself, like I said, if would other Elias Pettersson have gotten you Tanev, I don't know, but is that, other Elias Pettersson is a guy that you're leaning on for a couple of years. That's the other thing to think about, is that in a couple of years from now, you're looking at a couple defensemen, young Swedish defensemen you want in the lineup. So how does all that factor in? But yeah, Carey, I'd love Sean Walker, but I don't think that's happening. So Alex Carey, how about that?
Hey, could you imagine if in the pantheon of Canucks lore, with the Bure trade, with 2 Luongo trades, even Hodgson for Cassian, which came out of left field, could you imagine the day we would have had if it was Pettersson to Carolina for Kakaniemi, Natchez, and a bunch of prospects and picks?
Oh, man. The thing that was fun thinking about that was that you sit there and you think, well, that Carolina's always in a lot of talks. They actually, there haven't been a lot of big deals. It's kind of funny, but yeah, it was that I sat back and thought about it. I was like, oh man, I suppose it could still happen, right? It happens. Right?
Yeah. Well, if it does, we'll be breaking in with emergency programming. I assure you that, Patrick, and you'll have to work that day as well. Patrick, thank you for this. We'll catch up next week. Have a great weekend, buddy.
Take care, guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.